Hello, I'm back. This is a reply video to a dude who basically asked me a few questions. His name is Steven. Let me go look this up right here because I'm doing this impromptu, extemporaneous, like right off the bat. So I need to look up a few things. This video is about emulation, modding, and Hyperkin. Because, I mean, I can't just answer a question. I have to add it into something else that's current and going on. So, we'll begin with emulation. Emulation itself, by itself, is not illegal. Believe it or not, it's not. You just can't, it's not illegal to emulate. It's also not illegal to use commercial ROMs with the emulator, provided that you rip the ROMs yourself or own the original game. Now, because I'm a stickler for the rules, I've done all three when it comes to emulation, and the reason why is pretty damn simple. See, the thing is that I have oh lord. Let me state my retro consoles, and before I get down into it, I'm going to tell you my definition of retro console. Retro console is a console that uses a format that is not easily replaced or still in use today. So, technically speaking, the 3DS is, by that definition, technically a retro console because it's using what is essentially a cartridge. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's a cartridge. Now, so that means the last Nintendo retro console was the N64 because it was still using cartridges. Cartridges were the accepted form of gaming for the longest time. Because, don't forget, originally when games first came out, they were what you would call the games were built into the system, so you'd get like something that would have like 3 or 4 derivations of Pong. Right, Pong. It's like, this is Pong. This is it was essentially Breakout, but it was essentially Wall Ball, but with Pong, where like you had a wall and it would get faster as you bounced it off the paddle to the wall. It just, like everything was derivations of Pong. And I finally found the name of the person who I said I would give this, do this video for, Stephen O'Brien. So there you go, Stephen O'Brien. This is for you. But yeah, it was basically everything was built into the console, and then we moved on to cartridges with Channel F and stuff like that. That was the first one that really used cartridges, and then from then on, we stuff got awesome because I mean cartridges, those are the mark of the retro consoles. All of the retro consoles used cartridges. So by that measure, the PS1, PS2, PS3, PSP, PS Vita, those are not retro consoles. They don't use cartridges. Conceivably, you could mod a PS1, a PS2, and a PS3 and burn a disc and run it on said console. And that's something easily done because almost every PC now can burn discs, which is ridiculous. But now, for the PS3, you'd need a Blu-ray disc burner, which is not in widespread use, but I'm pretty sure within the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be Blu-ray disc burners because people will be like, oh, my Blu-ray disc was corrupted, I want to make a copy and burn that stuff. And, Sony's going to come out with one, and it's like only if you use the ascribed whatever, the XYZ, but then they'll come out with, Philips will come out with one, and Magnify, well, not Magnify, it's Philips and Panasonic, and those will be jailbroken and you can burn anything you want to. But anyway, so a retro console is one that uses a format, to me, that is not easily replaced or still in use. So, the Sony does not have retro consoles. They don't, because they were at the cusp of when people were switching over to CDs. So their discs are still the current format. Same thing with the Xbox. Nintendo started out as a retro console company, and they've gradually moved towards being a more modern company because they started using discs. First it was the mini discs, and then it was normal size discs with the Wii, and now you have a disc that's comparable to a Blu-ray. Not Blu-ray because Nintendo's not going to pay Sony royalties for using Blu-ray technology, which is pretty smart. But yeah, emulation within itself is not illegal, as long as you aren't using commercial ROMs. And if you are using commercial ROMs, you have to own the original ROM, and technically you have to rip it yourself. Now, because I'm a stickler for, as I said earlier, a stickler for rules and regulations, when I was in college, that's what I actually did. There was a mom and pop. I went to the University of Hartford in Connecticut. There was a mom and pop gaming store that was like way in Newton, which is spelled Newtown, but in New England it's pronounced Newton. I don't know, man, I'm from the South. So, mom and pop store in Newton, we would go there and we would friggin', they had like a ripper, the ripper's for sale, and you just plugged it into your computer and it would, like, you could copy a ROM from, you plug it in, you could copy, like, for SNES ROMs, which is the one I used. I had an SNES and an NES one. Since then, they were water damaged when my basement at my parents' house flooded. And I'm like, at that point, that's why I love the Virtual Console, because I don't need to keep up with all that stuff. It's so great. But anyway, the SNES was a great console. But I digress. So emulation is basically that. Your non-commercial emulation, like home brews and stuff like that, perfectly legal. If you're going to use commercial emulation, then you're going to have to either rip them yourselves or own the original game. And like, it's illegal to do it if you don't have the actual game. So, and you can't say I once owned it. You have to actually have the physical copy of the game. Now, most people who claim that emulation isn't illegal and say that they have the original game are lying their ass off, because a lot of these games are just so rare, or, you know, people threw them away, they're in collections now, they lost them, whatever. So, you know, me personally, I don't really care. You want to own a game? God bless you. You don't own the game, I'm not going to get mad, because my rules towards emulation are this, okay? If it's a game that is difficult to get a hold of, was never brought to your region, or was not translated, then downloading a translated ROM of that game, or downloading a PAL version of that game and playing it, I mean, you're just a gamer doing what you have to do in order to enjoy your hobby. When emulation gets a little iffy is when people start hacking or finding workarounds with modern consoles, current gen consoles, or close to current gen consoles, and stealing money from the developers, the people behind that console. For example, the R4 DS, 3DS carts that are now illegal because Nintendo will find your ass and send the Nintendos after you and curb stomp you. Well, not really, they won't curb stomp you, but it's pretty bad. The thing is that they're pretty, those were going up against, even though they use cartridge technology, what was going on was that, like, people would buy those, download a ton of Game Boy Advance, DS ROMs to it, and then basically, like, not buy the games. And that was kind of iffy, illegal, a little on the blah side. So Nintendo went after the makers of that, and they were like, well, it wasn't about that. Yes, it was. You know, because I had a friend in high school, her brother had one, and I just always felt dirty, he's like, hey man, you want to play? I'm like, no, I'm good. I've never been one of the people who was for piracy, you know. Unless piracy, I mean, it's one of those things that if you're doing it out of principle, like you're going after Ubisoft with their Uplay BS or EA with their Origin BS or something like that. I mean, I don't like it, but you know, what are you gonna do? SimCity 4 when it first came out, where it was like you have to log in, all that bullshit, you know, which segues into mod. I was one of those people that I didn't really get into console modding. I just bought the corresponding console. So like I have a Famicom and an NES. Actually, I have a Famicom with a disc system and an NES. I have a Super Nintendo and a Super Famicom. I have an N64. I do not have a DD drive for my N64 because all the ones I try to get are like $200, $300, and I'm not spending that much on an add-on that has like 4 games. That's just 4 games for 3. No. That being said, you know, I have modded for the retro consoles. I don't like modding my retro consoles because I still have my original SNES, I still have my original NES, and I don't like I have too much memories to like cut into it. It's like I don't like doing it. So I have the Japanese counterparts for a lot of those consoles. You know, because Nintendo region locks. Sega region lock too, but like in order to mod a Sega Genesis to play Japanese games, it's kind of easy. You just have to open up a panel and do a little bit of soldering and wiring, and it changes it up. But I never did that either. I have a Japanese Sega Genesis too. But that being said, I have modded my more modern older consoles. Like my Dreamcast I modded to play I modded it to play Japanese games. I modded my PS1 to play Japanese games. No, not the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was region free. The PS1 is the one I modded to play free game. Back in the day, there used to be they used to try and sell you in various young men's magazines. These aren't like when I say young men's magazines, I mean like Boys Life, stuff like that. You could look in the back and you'd find like, oh, mod your Dreamcast, mod your Universal Chip, Universal Player. That's since a load of hooey. Basically what they do is that they go and do a hard mod, which is, you know, change the wiring a bit so that the region locking was removed. The reason I modded my PS1, because I was not buying a Japanese PS1, the shipping things from Japan is just a pain in the ass. Shipping shit from Japan is just a fucking headache. I've shipped disclaimer, I own a franchise of 2 businesses, 2 establishments, soon to be 3, of barcades in the DC metropolitan area. And as the name describes, that means I have some pinball machines and arcade machines. And the thing is that you can get a lot of like old school arcade machines here, like Donkey Kong Jr., Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, stuff like that. But a lot of stuff you kind of have to get from Japan, like the more modern stuff, and that is murder on shipping and handling. The only reason I can get some of these is because of, you know, the magic of business money, tax free, and business expenses, that type of thing, and my business credit card. And it is a business expense because, I mean, you know, you gotta have the arcade machines. So which leads to, you know, so console modding, I'll mod a modern console. I won't mod a older one. I don't have the energy for it. I don't, you know, I'm too attached to my older consoles. Like I remember one time a friend of mine dropped his SNES and a corner chipped off, And I was like, damn, man, why would you do that to your SNES? And he didn't care. But now that he's older, he's like, oh, man, I feel bad about that. It's all dinged up. Plus, it's golden because he left it out where the sun could get to it, and it turned it kind of piss gold a little bit. Piss golden with the SNES console. Mine has it. Mine's still great. Which leads to Hyperkin. Hyperkin, the Retron 5, which is supposedly is able to play 5 formats of retro console style games. It can play Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, SNES, Genesis, and Master System, if I remember correctly. Yeah, pretty sure that's it. Basically, the Genesis, sorry, not the Genesis, the SNES, sorry, not the SNES, shit, the word am I looking for? Not the Genesis, the Retron 5, basically, the people at Hyperkin got in trouble because basically they used a lot of free emulators like SNES 9X and Nesticle and stuff like that in order to GB Advanced, in order to play, in order to do their Hyperkin, their Retron 5. Because the Retron 5 isn't actually playing these games, it's emulating them. And, I mean, this is what everyone thought they were doing, because it's clear to anyone who knows anything about gaming that this box is not emulating all this, because it would be expensive. The components for all of these systems are no longer made. Now, maybe if you find like a factory that does work, you can send them the blueprints and they'll make it. But it's much easier and cheaper, but those parts are no longer being made. The methods to make them are outdated and not really efficient anymore. So basically, at this point in time, you just have to go with it and kind of do what you got to do. Me personally, I think Hyperkin is up shit's creek because they used other people's work. They're charging people for it. That's the thing that I've always kind of thought a little iffy, because emulators are meant to be free, and if you use an emulator and you mod it in such a way that you're selling a product with it, most makers of emulators frown upon that because you're not supposed to do it. It's kind of like this. You're not supposed to do it for 3 reasons. First of all, most hardware manufacturers of video game systems they can't stop emulations. As long as people have PCs, they're gonna do whatever the hell they want. However, when you start making money off of it, that's a problem. They don't like that. They can go after people if they do that. They can say, oh my god. And while I'm sure that a lot of the people who made these emulators might not have the money for suing Hyperkin, I'm pretty sure if they're making money off of emulators that are based off of consoles that these people made, they could get sued by Nintendo or Sega. And if they got sued by Nintendo or Sega, they say, hey, you owe us a part of that money because you're making money off an emulator based off of our system. That would, because I'm pretty sure Nintendo and Sega would put their foot in their ass. And I don't blame them, because, I mean, as someone who has kept like a lot of retro systems, kept my old retro systems, my SNES, my Genesis, my Sega CD, my Master System, my NES. Like, if I can keep my old shit, why can't you? I mean, I understand that's kind of an unreasonable thing to have towards people, but what the heck. So this video is almost 20 minutes long. I'm gonna leave while I still have the energy. It was fun. I hope that answered your questions. Stephen O'Brien. Here's looking out. Okay then, have a good day.